and I'm going to welcome you once again, because I think probably we're all a little bit more present now. So welcome for real now to this panel. Again, I'm Lily Wolf, and I'm honored to be moderating this conversation about racial equity as we dive into the first panel of Harvest, representing this great new organization, Title Track, that I'm honored to be a part of. And I do anti-oppression work and racial equity work for a living, and I'm the cultural healing facilitator for Title Track. And so I'm just going to really invite these folks up here on stage. Holly Bird, Will C., and Rachel Marcos Havens to introduce themselves in their own voices and kind of just tell you who they are in whatever way feels right for them in this moment. And then we will just share with you a little bit about the work that each of them are doing and that Title Track is going to be doing, sharing kind of what is firing us up and inspiring us right now around racial equity, and also what we see as challenges both in our local communities and nationally, given our current socio-political landscape. So, without further ado, Holly Bird.
I'm Holly Bird, and I'm hot. No, Shaskawasaque Nindijnakas, Nimki Nindodam, Traverse City Nindonjaba, San Felipe Pueblo Nindonjaba, and I'm Holly Bird. That's my English name. My real name means Blue Lightning Woman, and I'm ThunderClan from San Felipe Pueblo. I live in Traverse City, and I greet you that way because it's, in my culture, the respectful way to introduce myself. And I'm here in a respectful way. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so glad to be here with these lovely, wonderful panelists. Thank you so much, Lily. And everybody who's here. I'm glad that we're sharing this space, however hot it may be. And I am feeling the cool breeze, though it feels really nice. And hope that we can, for a little while, put our hearts together, put our minds together, and breathe some of the same breaths here. My background is, I think I was an activist, or at least a rebel, from the time I was born. I'm Native, so, it goes with the territory. And otherwise, I'm an attorney. I do a lot of work on behalf of my people, meaning Native Americans, but I also do work for women and children and elders. So I'm proud of all aspects of my work, so I think I'd mention that too. More recently, I've been working both as a tribal judge. I'm a Supreme Court judge for the Nottawasapi Huron Band in Battle Creek. I was the civil ground coordinator at Standing Rock for the Water Protectors Legal Collective. That's the attorney that lived in camp and dealt with all the in-camp stuff. And I've since continued that work as a board member and as a volunteer attorney, most notably on the civil rights cases that we're doing, suing the law enforcement for excessive force, et cetera, et cetera. I created the Michigan Water Protectors Legal Task Force. Have done a lot of work with women and children, specifically with MMIW, missing, murdered, and indigenous women, abuse and neglect, things of that nature. Lots of racial equity work that goes in there, and sometimes just by being one of the first people of my culture to do it is that source of equity. I am the very first Native American arbitrator in the United States, if that tells you how new being a Native attorney really is. And let's see, since then, I've had the great privilege to be working as a board member on Title Track, this fairly new organization that we've created with, I would say, Seth Bernard at the helm, but under the wonderful teachings of Miss Sally over here and Jack Siemens here. We have so many wonderful mentors in our area for peace and justice and environmental causes. I see Joe's here. He's one of our board members as well, another awesome attorney. And of course, Lily is our outreach. Your title is like healing and cultural healing, which I love. And then So, of course, I'm spread thin. I was just nominated for the National Task Force on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. And I'm really happy to be here. Miigwech.
Thanks, Holly.
Peace. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Oh, that's good. It's good to hear. It's good to be here. I go by the name of Will C. Also go by Owolabi William Copeland. I am a cultural organizer from Detroit, Michigan. Also a hip-hop artist. For many years have been an environmental justice organizer because it's beautiful to be in the great outdoors, but we also know that the environmental conditions are not fairly and not equally distributed in terms of who has access to a healthy environment or to a clean environment. And so while we definitely hope that everybody gets a chance to enjoy the great outdoors, we know that in this system it is not fairly or equally distributed. And so therefore we had to take the environmental movement further and create the environmental justice movement in order to try to bring about equity in the realm of who has access to environment. But lately I've been just working in what we call African traditional religions. And lately I've been working as a cultural organizer. Hip-hop music is one of those forms. It's a spiritual practice. It's a global, ancestral, African indigenous practice, but also just strengthening our cultures, so we can take this discussion and start with equity and move towards liberation. And so I'm just coming here from Detroit. We just got out a 3-hour car ride about 15, 20 minutes ago, and I send everybody greetings from Southeast Michigan.
Thank you, Will.
I'm listening to these incredible, powerful, heartful beings and going, well, how do I introduce myself after that? My name is Rachel Marco Havens, and I'm here from Woodstock, New York, which is a 98% Caucasian town, if you look it up in the Wikipedia breakdown. And so the conversation about racial equity is one that I've never really been privy to, or I hadn't been for a long time, because here's an example. A friend of mine at a party recently pulled me aside, and I had just gotten there and I hadn't really landed, and she pulled me aside and she said, Rachel, after all these years, I just realized that you're brown. Cause in Woodstock, we don't see color, and we never have seen color, and I realized maybe I never really saw you, and how does it feel to grow up being unseen and not really having equity in the conversation? And it's hard to say because I just saw it as, I took it personally. And so to sit in a conversation like this and consider racial equity in a place where I just figured I personally didn't have any. It's an interesting conversation, and so I stepped in to social and environmental, and I've always been a spiritual justice activist, but I stepped in based around the water and protecting the water, and I ended up here meeting so many incredible people, really moving for the benefit of a greater whole, and that took me to so many places, and right now, I guess in one of my major regular conversations about racial equity is within Joanna Macy's work, the work that reconnects. I somehow ended up in one of her 10-day retreats, and it was the first time that I thought, wow, maybe I'll join the People of Color caucus. Because I didn't know, I know that I've always stood out, but I come from a town where it's not America. I was not raised in America. I was raised in this weird hippie town that thinks they are so progressive while people never saw me. It was a really interesting place to be. So I ended up in this conversation, and somehow for the last year and a half, I've been part of a small group that's been working to to bring some racial equity to Joanna's work, because at some point people stopped and stood up and went, wait a minute, this is incredible work, but it's being brought into communities of color and it's causing damage because it's being presented by primarily privileged white people. And when you want to go on a tour of let's go back through our ancestral conversation from now to the first time we tied our shoe to our ancestors, and it's someone like me who is colonizer, colonized, the enslaved, like it's a very different conversation when you're me and when you're being led by someone who has no idea who you are. And when you don't have equity on the cover of the magazines, and you don't have equity in land, and you don't have, it's intense. So I'm feeling pretty privileged to be here with you, and now I'm gonna do a little more listening.
Thank you, Rachel. So we're going to show a short film, or Will is going to share a short film with us that kind of speaks to some of his work. And then we're going to hear from anything else that Will wants to share, and then Holly and Rachel. And then we're going to shift at about 4:45, and whoever is interested can join us in Maddie's Circle for kind of a continuation and more of like an intimate discussion style. Because obviously 45 minutes is not very much time to touch the surface of this topic, but at least we'll highlight these good folks' work and then invite you to join us for a continued conversation and to just stay in touch with us and stay in the work as we build the racial equity component of Title Track. So, yeah.
When we talk about racial equity in this land, in this country, so much has been taken from so many people. So much has been taken, so many different things have been taken from so many people, and then they try to say you're a minority and you get this little small piece, this little 1% of a piece or 2% of a piece or whatever this small piece, and they make it seem like it's normal for you to have this little tiny piece and normal for you to not be privy to a universal cosmological piece. And so this piece, this video right here is called Take the Houses Back. And it has a lot of meaning to a lot of people because when it comes to racial equity, a lot of people are realizing the things that need to be taken back. And so this, we share this video with you for your enjoyment.
Moral imperative that relates to whether or not people have a right to live inside of a house.
Take the houses back, 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 take the houses back. They belong to the people, take the houses back. Take the house back, baby, take the house back. Take the house back, baby, take the house back. We don't gotta go get nobody's mouse trap. We got what we need in our community. Grab the keys in your hand, unlock that. Get a crowbar and just rock that. Let's meet at the bank and just crowd that. So at least that we know where the power's at right here. Making houses, turn them into homes. Let your mental roam like a signal phone. It's true indeed, there's a human need. People on the street and the crib's empty. This ain't no baby, babe, ain't no ass to shake. Just to open and bail, get the class away. Cause we mad as hell, man, it's cold as hell. We some northern soldiers, they made us yell. To my southern cousins, let's take it there. On the coast, provoke, protect your peace. Occupy our homes, let's play for keeps. Let's roll the dice, this game is deep. Take abandoned lots, make them garden plots. Then guard them plots, cause the block is hot. Unbar the lots, then watch for cops. When we get together, we're hard to stop. Take the house back, baby, take the house back. Take the house back, baby, take the house back. We don't gotta go get nobody's mouse trap. We got what we need in our community. Grab the keys in your hand, unlock that. Get a crowbar and just rock that. Let's meet at the bank and just crowd that. Show at least that we know where the power's at.
The cost of living is going up. Chances of living are going down. The cost of living is going up. Chances of living are going down. The cost of living is going up. Chances of living are going down. The needs of the many must always outweigh the needs of the few.
We got the mamas, papas, attorneys, rockers, kids in the fosters, vets and doctors, black flag activists, gramps and nomads, grannies, big old families, oh man.
If we can't fix the problem this way, or this way, that's legal, we have no trouble in doing illegal. Not none at all. We flip over like it ain't nothing.
Everybody need a place to kick back. When you get yours, then it's time to give back. Say we can't wait, man, get your abatement. Everybody eating, come grab your plate, man. My granny and my uncle and my aunt used to share a crib. Where you live, it's no embarrassment. There you is, she got a house when she wrote that check. And he got a house, went to court and shit. They kept their spot when the folks protest. My man got his spot for $1 and a lease. When the bank's foreclosure game ain't over, I came to the office, they marched like soldiers. Like, what's wrong, baby girl? Bring your doll back. Grab your gym shoes, your bike, bring it all back. No trouble, baby brother, grab your ball back. Get your comic books, come on, grab all that. Take the house back, baby, take the house back. Take the house back, baby, take the house back. We don't gotta go get nobody's mouse trap. We got what we need in our community. Grab your keys in your hand, unlock that. Get a crowbar and just rock that. Let's meet at the bank and just crowd that. Show at least that we know where the power's at right here.
The cost of living is going up. Chances of living are going down. The cost of living is going up. Chances of living are going down. The cost of living is going up. Chances of living are going down. The cost of living is going up. Chances of living are going down.
Take the houses back. Y'all doing all right? Good. Thank you for letting me show this video. Thank you for letting me be part of the panel. Thank you for listening. I'll just speak briefly, and if you want to hear more, then I'll talk more when we get to Maddie's Circle. The first point, you can definitely do a search for the video if you like it. Just Take the Houses Back. You can check it out. There's an organization, a coalition called illegalforeclosures.org. And what it shows and what it talks about and what it relates to this video is that in Detroit, there are tens of thousands of people whose houses have been foreclosed in Detroit. And over 50%, over 60% of those foreclosures, according to the Michigan Constitution, are illegal. Because of how their property has been valued, they're not supposed to be paying property tax and getting foreclosed on the property taxes on those houses. There's an organization in Buffalo, New York, called Push Buffalo, and they did research, and it showed that in majority black communities, when it comes, or majority people of color or black communities, when it comes to things like water and electricity, the utilities have more punitive punishments in terms of shutting people off, in terms of charging fees to shutting people off, in terms of blocking, like literally putting things in, after they shut them off, putting things in the water so that you have to pay hundreds of dollars to get your water turned back on. And they don't do these properties. If you're late for a payment in majority white communities, they don't assess these type of penalties. And so part of, while it is definitely significant to talk about being a minority in a majority white community, there are certain dynamics that take place when we are congregated in numbers. Then this American society does these certain punitive things to our communities. And it is great and important to support individuals of color, but there's a whole nother reality. I like the word colonize. There's a whole nother reality going on in our communities, which this society is doing to us. And that is the first point that I want to mention, that equity comes into play in terms of the things that are happening in these majority black, majority people of color communities. So I speak to you as an entertainment justice artist because one of the things that is happening in our community is that the mainstream media is spreading lies and putting out information and putting out messages to try to get us to hate each other and kill ourselves. And if you are a black person, or the next time you look at what is considered to be black entertainment, look and see how many black people are dying. Look and see how many black people are being degraded. Look and see how many black people are being abused in what is called mainstream entertainment. And so as entertainment justice, part of what we do is to say that we need to create our own entertainment, because the entertainment that we're being given is teaching us to be entertained by our own death and our own misery and our own disrespect. And so it's good to bring this entertainment justice to here. And then lastly, very happy to be on this panel. I've learned a lot from many of the Anishinaabe and some of the other Native folks. And one of the questions that they put on my mind is this question of liberation and sovereignty. And so I speak to you not as an African American, but as a new African. And as a new African who never was asked, who was kidnapped hundreds of years ago and brought to this land, and never was asked if I wanted to be a citizen or not. And so if you imagine that your family was kidnapped in a special house and brought to this house and forced to work, and then one day they said, you know what, we're not gonna force you to work anymore. We're just gonna give you equity with the other family members. Here you go, you'll have equity in this house. One day, you don't have it now, but one day you'll have equity in this house that you were kidnapped and brought into. You may wanna say, no, we wanna get out of here and get our own house. You might, if you think about being kidnapped and you think about what that means. You know what I'm saying? And so, as a New African, we recognize that in many other countries, they take a vote. They say, hey, what do you want to do? You know what I'm saying? You have sovereignty. You're a people. You have a right to a country. You have a right to this or that. And we were never given this choice. And so, as a New African, and Detroit is one of the key centers in this country. You're so lucky to be so close to Detroit, just a few hours away. And if you come and spend time in Detroit, Detroit is one of the key centers of African thought in this whole nation. It has done, the Nation of Islam was founded there. The Republic of New Africa was declared there. I could go on and on in terms of black people who are looking to go back into our ancestry and have our lives make sense, not just over the last 10, 20, or 30 years, but make sense in terms of who we are as Africans. And so you're very lucky to be so close to Detroit. And so I encourage you to come to Detroit and come kick it with the Detroit Africans, of whom I am just one of many. And so that'll just be a little taste of my remarks. When we get to Maddie's Circle, we can, I'm sure we'll have more conversations about all of these things. But I just wanted to give a little introduction to myself, introduction to our entertainment justice work, and a little food from where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Holly, do you want to share some highlights from what you're working on, and particularly ways that you want to call folks in to engage with the Native justice work?
Sure, and one thing I want to touch on, I was just telling him that I grew up in Detroit, actually.
Hey.
And I moved to the Traverse City area when I started Interlochen as a teenager, but my family didn't move up until I was in college, and then I went down to Michigan State. So, but I have the fondest love for my hometown. And
Right.
One of the things that I was just thinking about when I saw all these houses, because it looks like where I grew up. And back when I was about four and five, my family my parents had split up. It was me, my mom. There was a bunch of us all living in a house, of course. We lived in an all black neighborhood. We were the only mixed, I would call mixed family. And this was back before I had any real awareness of who I was, as a young Native, biracial person or bicultural person. And, but I was starting to notice the weird stares that I'd get, or the gentle exclusions, the little Pocahontas jokes, things like that. And I always said the neighborhood that was my favorite neighborhood that I lived in was the poorest black neighborhood we lived in. That's, to this day, it's been my favorite growing up. And I always said it was because they knew who I was already and had my back then. It was beautiful. And so to this day, I remember that when he started showing those things, it actually kind of made me well up a little bit, because those are the memories that I have. And we lived in a time and in a neighborhood that was embattled. There was a lot of stuff going on. We had neighbors burning crosses on the lawns, not the neighbors, but people coming into the neighborhood and burning crosses on the neighbors' lawns and stuff like that. So I was exposed to the ugliness of that really early, and that really shaped a lot of my world. So, but as a Native person, I've had, as Native people, we are considered to be the smallest minority on Earth. However, people seem to forget that most South Americans and Central Americans are also indigenous. Mexicans are indigenous, so we're not as small as people think we are in population. But what happened is a lot of people have lost their own indigenous identity to some really extreme colonialism. And I hate to say that Spanish colonialism was worse than English colonialism and French colonialism, but as far as trying to demolish an identity, it was. So I have a lot of, I'm actually part Mexican too. Part of my indigenous background is in the Mexican community. And that was the last community to ever accept that they were indigenous, which is interesting. So I've had to deal with that component too, like, hey, grandma, you know you're Indian, right? Oh, just don't talk about it, mija. You know, and I'd be like, well, why not? You know? So it's my experience is this, as this person living in this body and in this culture with these memories and with the experiences of my family. It's interesting because one of the things that I've heard recently from somebody in response to an outcry to an appropriation of a headdress was that we are the most, we are the people with the most rights and who get the most money from their casinos, and therefore we have it over all of the rest of the people in the community. And it just cracks me up because I'm like, well, we also have the highest death rates. We have the highest suicide rates. We have the highest incarceration and police brutality rates. It actually, even with our African community, we actually outrank them by three times in that regard. And I'm not making this like a match. It's all bad. But that's where we're at. And our voice is just now starting to be heard, and you know, we all support each other in that, which is fantastic. But it's really weird for me to be here telling you I'm the first of my kind in some aspects, because most people don't believe that can be true. But the fact remains is, you know, last week, Minnesota, the Supreme Court of Minnesota ruled that a pipeline does not have to take into consideration that it's crossing traditional cultural treaty land of Native American tribes, or even some of their reservations in order to build their pipeline. They don't have to go through a permitting process for that. Even here, you know, we've had riot booster laws where we can't show up and protest our land being taken without getting a felony, right? And that's really directed at us. It's meant to keep their thumb on us. So we keep fighting, and we keep trying to call out those things in hopes that people like you will see that and join. We all join hearts together to make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody, because when it happens to us, it happens to everybody. We believe that we're doing these things, protecting the land, trying to teach about how to live with the earth for everybody, not just us. It's for everyone, especially these little Banojis over here, because you know they are our next generations and beyond. So if I have anything to impart, I'd encourage everyone to you know, take notice. Don't take it. Don't take your local Native American, because a lot of people like to do that too. But take an opportunity to learn and educate yourself about things that you might not understand. A lot of people don't know that I was only given the right to free religion as of 1987, right? They stopped sterilizing our women legally in 1982 without consent, but it still happens, believe it or not. So make yourself aware that these injustices are still occurring, and as far as climate is concerned, I think that I hear a lot from some people, oh, we're bad, we came here and we wrecked everything. And I say, well, Creator put us all here together for a reason. You know, we've learned a lot from you, but we got some kind of bad stuff too. And it's time for us all to start listening to each other and figuring this out. That's what Creator really wanted in the first place. So, miigwech for having me here. I'm glad to be here. I encourage you to listen closely to all these beautiful, beautiful people here. They're beautiful souls. Some of them are more humble than they should be. And I love that. And thank you, Seth, as well.
Thank you, Holly.
It's so interesting to be here on this panel. Like, I often end up a wrap-up girl kind of because I'm like kind of all jumbled into the conversation. But you know, so much came up for me in this, since sitting down, watching that video, coming from a community, like I mentioned, a 98% white community that was once like super hip and is now being completely like whitewashed of not just of creative color, right? And then here you are working with entertainment justice, and I feel like we're being attacked. Just as creative people, just in general, like people making the choice to dive into our creative expression, into being exactly who we are, into sitting on a panel like this with the colonizer, the colonized, the enslaved, all of these ancestors in the room with us. Like, this is really deep work, even just to be on this panel, and to have made the choice to come here on your Friday afternoon. Like, thank you for coming and sitting here with us. I think it feels really good that this isn't an empty room. I really appreciate that. So I am currently home free. I left my little town, and I have a one-way ticket to an artist residency in October, and I'm not sure where I'm going to land. And I've been sort of looking around. I love I love Michigan so much, right? And so I've been kind of interviewing the area and watching my own hometown go to a place where none of the artists, none of the musicians, none of the people that make us I live in Woodstock, New York, right? So it's like this famous town, right? We don't have a space there anymore. The creatives and the people that make it a destination point are not welcome to live there, and we're basically being told, like, it's okay, we're gonna create an artist revival. And the ego surrounding the gentrification of my community is so deeply rooted and so painful. And so then I come here, and I went to see someone who's kind of like a sister, daughter, whatever you might call her, young girl, and she moved to Detroit, and she bought a house for $475 on a block where half of the people on the block don't live in their homes anymore because likely they were illegally forced from their homes. And so I go, wow, well, do I go to Detroit? Like, what? Do I go there? Or where do I go? Oh, and then I go over to Ann Arbor, and everyone's like, oh yeah, it's pretty, you're gonna find some equity here, sister, like, no. And then it's like, I cross the border to Ypsilanti, and I'm like, ooh, feels a little nicer over here. I kind of like this a little more, like maybe I'll end up there. And it's this place where there's so many, we're kind of just like, there's this wandering, like, when is it gonna be okay for us to land? That's really the question that comes up for me so often. And I have these ancestors talking, and some of them are saying, get off my land, and some of them are saying, like, what gives you the right to live in this house that was built by people who didn't come to build it, like. And so you just kind of wander around, and then I have that other part of me that goes, I deserve to have a place to land. Now, who is that talking? Is that the colonizer ancestors? Or is that where do I land? And so that question continues to come up for me. And one last thing to just kind of wrap up what comes for me in the conversation of equity. And I was So 2 years ago, I didn't come to Harvest because I went to Standing Rock. And I drove there going, what the hell am I doing there? There was a pipeline being drilled in my own hometown, and the river was spitting the drill bits out two a month. And the pipeline was going to go 105 feet away from a nuclear power plant with no evacuation plan 30 miles north of New York City. Why am I going to Standing Rock? Like, what am I doing there? And when I got there, I realized, and I thought I was going to document, because I had this plan that I was going to go to all these indigenous communities and document their story. Like, what? And I knew it was wrong because I called Jen Kreisberg and I said, dude, you want to go on a road trip? Because I'm not going to be able to roll into all these communities and try to act like I have any equity in their story, right? And so I end up in Standing Rock, and I'm like, dude, you keep that camera in your pocket. This is not your story. This is not your story. No matter how much indigenous blood you might have in your, whether it's Arapaho, whether it's Shinnecock, whether it's Blackfeet, doesn't matter. This is not your story. So I left my phone and my camera and everything in my pocket. And now the people who most rooted my guts in the conversation about indigenous sovereignty, about racial equity, about environmental justice, they are young people under the age of 35, and most of them are indigenous. And those kids right now are standing in DC, finally getting a moment to have their equity in the conversation. Because I will tell you, there are people down there organizing these incredible, climate march, and they never considered the indigenous youth stories to be told by them. They wanted to tell them. And so now here we are. It's the youth climate march is happening right now all over the world and all over this country. And there are young indigenous and African young people going, wow, we're going to stake claim on the equity in this conversation around this. And I called my friend Rochelle the other day just to say I love you and I miss you. And you know what? I just want to state a little bit about that Standing Rock conversation. The equity that people are claiming in that conversation is still hurting the indigenous people on that land. And for many people there, it's worse now than it was before that movement. Because when you get your tires slashed to go pump your gas, when you're called a prairie nigger because you want to go eat at the diner, when you don't want to leave your house and go up to Bismarck to get provisions, and so you go hungry more days in order to get there, to need enough to make it worth making that 20, 40-minute drive. There's a lot of equity that people are still looking to claim in our stories, in the music that we're making, in the land that we live on. And so please include us in those conversations from the beginning, versus saying, how do we include more brown people, more black people, more indigenous people in our conversations? Start by including us at the beginning of the conversation, not when you want to color it up. And thank you. I also appreciate being here quite a bit. I love you guys. I love this barn. Love you, Seth.
Thanks, Rachel.